Hello to Heather Dowd and the great people at the Beyond Laptops conference. Where was this conference?
It's a Yokohama International School in Japan, I believe.
Yes. And we get to talk to you guys, and we're really excited about that. The topics were creativity, remixing culture, and PBL, and
right in the wheelhouse.
Right where we live. And so we want to just talk a few minutes about what each of those terms means to us. We start with creativity, right?
Sure.
That's where I live, having been an art teacher for 13 years and now talking to people about the importance of creativity. You know, for all those years, it's like I had to fight to justify the existence of the art program. Now suddenly people are talking about how important creativity is everywhere I go. I'm like, how excited am I that finally it seems to be validated that creativity is important.
Well, I'll jump in here. I come from a background, my master's is in gifted and talented, and creativity is a huge part of our conversation. But one thing that we keep running into is, what is creativity? How do you define? How does one define what creative is?
This is important because just like PBL, there are so many flavors. It's important to say what the important one is, or the one that yields the best results for kids and learners. And creativity, I think, needs to be, defined more broadly. That I think that, you know, if you say creativity has to be visual arts, or creativity has to be music, or creativity has to be dance, and all of those things can be creative. They can also be me learning exactly what you teach me and be prescriptive, and that doesn't mean creativity. To the unwashed, it might look like creativity out of context, but any creator knows what we're talking about, that when you're finally freed to make what you want from the materials you have available, then you can begin to create, truly create something that belongs to you. And so I think it's important for people to understand that every element of society, everything in life, combined with everything else or whatever I've decided to put together in a new way no one's seen before. It's my take on things. Could be my creativity, and that could be software, that could be programming, it could be everything. So if you don't broaden your definition, you're never going to get to that other stuff. Like programming could be creative, or game design could be creative. So I try to knock down those walls of arrogance that people have when they want to put creativity in a straitjacket and say this is creativity, or this is creativity. I think making. When you start making, if you're not following instructions and not deviating from those instructions, that's one thing. That's what following instructions. But the minute that you have creative, I'm using the word again, but you have, I guess, your own freedom to make things your way.
I think that's really very close to, I think, what a lot of people want creativity to mean, is that it's taking something from someone else and putting your own spin on it. It's great to take nothing make something out of nothing. Creativity. I'm going to take it one step further. The conversations that happen sometimes in the world of gifted, because creativity has been in our wheelhouse since Paul Torrance in the 1950s, right? I mean, this has been a big deal. There's a fine line between, is that creative or is that weird? And I know I'm getting into a subjective conversation there, but to those who don't recognize what creativity is, or something that's truly creative might look weird. But then there's also that step further where it's just weird. You want to talk about that feeling?
You can dance on the edges of those definitions. I mean, Marcel Duchamp put a urinal on the wall and called it art. That was to a lot of people weird. What he was trying to do in that moment was push art's boundaries and say, we can do what we want. So there's going to be a whole lot of different interpretations of things. But I think at the base, at the bottom line as an educator, what I want kids to do is take the existing ingredients of life and the emerging ingredients of life and put them together in new and inventive ways. Da Vinci did this with the stuff of his time. If you look at Jules Verne, you know, he imagined the existing industrial age in the rivets and the steam parts and the very, you know, the new and exciting inventions, and mixed them into everything that we'd known before and did his best guess at what the future might hold. And here we are again at this sort of precipice of the past and the present with an amazing explosion of things. And to me, the palette, it's just a matter of a palette. What do you paint with? What's your palette? If it's limited and it's only color, then you'll always make really cool paintings with lots of really good colors. If it includes shape and dimension, then it's going to be sculpture plus color. And again, the broader the palette, the more freedom within the creativity, within the art.
What are the one more on this? It seems to me that we're also talking that creativity has a purpose. Whatever, if it's for beauty or whatever, that you just didn't put something together and call it creative. No, that's all for now.
Let's go.
There
Let's,
was there was a thought there, but it's okay.
let's pick that up
Yeah.
and threads of that up, because this purpose thing is really important. Purpose drives a lot of things. In education in particular, if things don't seem to have a purpose, we don't get to do them. And so part of the straitjacket that creative teachers live within is meeting the terms of that. That's addressing standards. That's all these things that I will call shackles or expectations or parameters, and living within those places has always been a challenge. They say, what's the purpose? Why are we doing this? Aren't you just rewarding kids? Isn't this just a kind of recess? Purpose. You were talking about, because we could probably jump right from thing to thing. We're talking about a purpose. In a way, I resent that you say I have to have a purpose, because I believe art for art's sake and creativity for creativity's sake is its own purpose. And in the end, it yields results. But those of us who work with kids can't just let kids enjoy themselves and play with paint, because they have to at some point, make a living, have a life, and so these things they make have to probably be headed towards something that will help them have a future of some kind.
That's a personal purpose. That if somebody just does something and say, why'd you do that, or tell me about that, and they can't tell you anything, that I don't consider that creativity. No matter how beautiful or how shocking, or it doesn't seem to be creative, it just seems to be accidental.
Right.
If somebody can say, I did this because, and tell a little bit about it, to me that's a personal purpose, or that it's meaningful for someone, something. Let's be open on what the meaning might be.
So let me jump into that a little bit. As an art teacher, I saw this a lot. I would call it lightning strike creativity. A kid was accidentally creative and can't replicate it. Almost it came from somewhere outside them, maybe a little early, because they don't really have control over their talent yet. We see this in gifted too. A kid doesn't know why they wrote that so well, but they cannot absolutely replicate that.
That's right.
I'm not saying the exact story, but that level of quality. So that can happen.
But isn't that our job? If we understand what creativity is and can be, even if it was accidental, we can maybe recreate an opportunity where it could happen again.
And that's where the portfolio comes in too. Is the kids become introspective and they become reflective about the things they've created, and over time they start to see a bigger picture of their development, because things can happen out of sequence. Right now I'm thinking visual arts, or thinking music, that kids sometimes just sort of do something exciting, which is a wonderful moment, because it can motivate them to stay with it. It can also frustrate them to death when they can't do it again. So that's sort of the role of a teacher, is bringing kids along that continuum. But I guess the place where it gets interesting for me, and that's where I brought my guitar into the shot and brought my iPad into the shot, I like to show some versions. And remember, there's a continuum of creativity that's much broader. I am not suggesting this is anything but one chapter in the possibilities that we have today with all of these tools. But as we look at these tools that are happening, it's not about whether the tool can play guitar, or you can play guitar or violin or viola on the tool. It's about what you create once you know that. Then you're back into creativity again. The prefabricated loops and things like that, you can argue and be a purist and say that's not creativity, even if I juxtapose them in any one of 10 million possible ways.
Remixed.
It bothers people sometimes that they didn't do every single part of it. Like, you're not allowed to play guitar unless you carved it out of wood yourself, made the strings yourself, and where do we quit?
Right.
So I'm okay with that. But let me kind of give you an example. Teaching guitar for years, I watched kids. Now, let's not even talk about creativity. First, let's talk about craft. Let's talk about just having enough ability to start trying to be creative. You know what I mean? So when you first grab a pencil, you can do scribbles, but you can't do transition shading yet, and you can't do contrast, and you don't know much. So there's a limited range of creativity that you have, and it gets broader with your talent, or with the ability to have some talent.
Just to bring this back to something that I can grab onto is, you're talking that for people who would fault using electronic creativity, art or music or whatever, it's as if we would go to first grade and say, you didn't make a masterpiece there, kid, this is not really art class, you're just playing.
Right.
And to not, very purposefully not call it art, because it's not good art.
Perfect art, or art by my definition.
Right.
The one I've chosen. I'd like to knock down those
Continue.
walls and give every teacher a little more latitude on what they want to define creativity as.
Mhm.
But what I'm interested in is how can I help kids start making and creating? How can I do that? And so, guitar, for instance, to play guitar, you could be creative and do improvised jazz and make stuff up and know nothing. You can mix sounds. Anyone can do that. But to really play chords and to play notes, you have to learn something of theory. And to do that on the guitar, you have to push these things down really hard, and it hurts. And the beginner hurts a lot, and they often quit at that pain moment, that threshold, where their passion to create cannot withstand the pain. And not everyone has that tolerance, and so they quit. But had they not faced that threshold, what could they have done? That's where I'm interested in exploring. So if I play a chord here, this is an E chord, and I teach the kid to put his finger here, here, and here, her fingers there, and strum. Okay, so you got two things. You're pushing down hard, and you're strumming. And you know where your fingers are, and you're pushing down hard, and you're strumming. And then there's tempo, and then there's chord changes. It builds, and it takes time, but the whole time it hurts until you have calluses. Do you see how barbaric this process, this cycle, could seem to somebody? Right? So
especially if they haven't been able to develop persistence in their life because of whatever, that something came easy, and so maybe school came easy or life came easy, and so they never learned how to have to work hard, or things came so hard at them that they just gave up too easily.
And you could say, well, that's their fault. Is that the role of a teacher? I've heard people say that. I taught it, she just didn't learn it.
It's her fault.
And they blame the customer. I'm looking for new ways to help kids find their on-ramp, And as we look at things like the iPad, and I love talking about GarageBand because it's free, and anything you can talk about is free is usually interesting to talk about. But the same chords are sitting here in the form of GarageBand. I've got it on an acoustic guitar, and this is I'll put this near my mic so we can hear. Now, I can strum E, and it costs me no pain, right? I just strum E. Or I can pick individual notes in E. So pain is off the table. And I can just say, let's paint with chords. Let's just paint with chords. And they're starting to write lyrics. And maybe the creativity is in the writing of the lyrics, or the exploration of genre, or a million other things. As long as pain is off the table, I have extra room to insert other kinds of variables and other kinds of choices for kids. So I'm excited by my interpretation of how we use this. And the last thing I want to hear is someone tell me this isn't valid. So I take the most powerful new tool and throw it away because it's not exactly the same as everything we've ever done.
It's somebody going to Buddy Holly and saying, wow, that's racket, not music, and not knowing what comes after.
But what is creativity?
Change.
Creativity leads to invention, because anything that you're creative, I tell kids, you're about to give birth to something, it's a terrible way to say it, that has never existed on the earth. This thing you just made exists here for the first time today because you exist. How cool is that? Right?
Say that again.
This thing here, right, exists in the world that never existed before because you are here watching the
Right. No, it's fine.
That's an exciting thing to say. I just manufactured something new. Well, that's an invention, and to invent is to make something that no one agrees with, because it's not established, it's not accepted yet. And so anybody on the cutting edge that makes anything new is always going to be criticized by the status quo folks, right? So unless you can withstand that. If you haven't been taught to persist beyond the objections of the now people, you can't invent, right? So Jobs pushed it, and Einstein pushed it, and Edison pushed it, and Gates pushed it against objections. Purists who found them wanting, found them wrong, and yet they did it anyway and identified entire new industries. And we're in a place now where we need our kids to be these people with new tools. The power of new tools plus old tools, exponentially better than anything we've ever seen.
You and I have drank the same Kool-Aid, obviously. This is the thing that we do, we both agree with this. But I'm going to rub against this because for sake of conversation. Okay, so let's say I'm in a conversation, as maybe the people in the Yokohama schools is right now. School is right now. And they find themselves agreeing with a lot of people. If somebody didn't really hear what you just said, that in order to be inventing something, I have to be rubbing against those who are in agreement. So just because I object against things, let's talk about those people who might label themselves as smarter than the average bear, or more clever, or inventing things because they don't agree with status quo. I'm asking you to disagree with yourself, but no, it's not really. It's just refining that Because I think some people hear what you have to say
Mhm. Yeah, I
and
think
misinterpret
I
it.
understand. There's a sort of creativity trance that I put myself in when I'm trying to make something new.
So,
Where yeah, I put myself into this place where everything's in flow, and then I insert a new variable in there to see how it plays with the other things. I call it fishing for ideas. And so these little hooks are down there, and I wait and see what bites. And it's hard to explain, but I've seen people in that moment where they're sort of lost in somewhere out here, and they're waiting for divine intervention. And we used to say, oh, well, I have a muse, or the universe hands me something. The truth is, you're opening your mind up to let everything dance with everything. I say, a play is where ideas audition for a part in the brain's production of understanding. I would say music is that, and art is that, and dreaming is that. And when you're sitting there with an agenda, there is no room for independent juxtaposition of ideas. So if we're going to create environments where kids can remix, and that kind of segues to our next topic, if they can remix what's always been, to me, that's a nice place to create.
this is one of the reasons why I love working with you so much, is because, one, we do agree on a lot, but there's a lot of things that we purposefully disagree on, I think. At least I try to.
It's important.
Because I want to stretch up, okay, what if this isn't true? What if this is true? And then, like, to set up a hurdle for ourselves and to look all around that hurdle and find out that hurdle really is part of the path. It's not a hurdle.
Right.
And to move through.
Well, the wind, sculpts things too. Adversity is part of the palette, whether we like it or not. So disagreement, dissension, facing naysayers, and really to identify someone and call them a naysayer is to preclude the idea that they might have a point. So the bigger idea is to embrace what they say, but not let it stop you, not let it hobble you. Someone that says you can't do it that way obviously isn't going to invent the thing you're about to invent. But if you let them make you believe what they believe, you'll never invent that thing.
Or when they say you can't do it, well, why is it I can't? Because of this. Thank you for helping me identify a hurdle that I'll now work to get over.
So coming to the copy, the remixing idea, and I think that's what I'm doing here. I think what I'm doing is taking music and the things that were, taking a tool that someone made and remixing. When I produce music now, a lot of the tracks that you hear on my songs come from the iPad. Are they great? I don't care. I'm the maker. I'll decide what the quality threshold has to be, and if you don't like it, don't buy my song. But it won't stop me from creating. It will not cripple me from creating. Will I ever get to where I could have been? I don't care. I'm driving this thing here. So I'm sitting in an airport, and the cello is playing an E here, while I'm playing an E here, and then sometimes I do this with my toes, or literally my nose, because I don't have anyone with me. I don't have a band. I don't have an orchestra. So I'm so sorry that it's not up to your standards, but this is what I, as a creator, want to do. And so anyone who doesn't have all of those tools and all of those people and all of those resources, there are still ways to do things that I think are compelling. Now, maybe the song you make this way is a sketch that you take to a studio and bring the Boston Pops Orchestra in, because you have great, but I still can sketch. Leonardo da Vinci sketched, Rembrandt sketched. They have sketchbooks of non-perfect work that led to perfect work. But where do they sketch? So if you don't think fine art can be made on things like this, that's fine. That's fine. We call them the non-customer when it comes to this.
Non-customer
But
creativity.
don't let that stop other people, because kids are going to remix. They're going to make things. They see our past, and they don't give it the credence we did, because we grew up with it. They see it as Schoolhouse Rock. They see that as what it is, just a cartoon. We saw it as part of, I ate my cereal, and then Snap, Crackle, and Pop was happening, and then I'm just a Bill, and the sheets were on. That's our memory. They see it as a variable that can be mixed in with the rap song and be this very interesting, remix of old culture. And people our age see that they've messed with something sacred. How dare they paint with my memories?
Right.
But not to them. To them, it's all just fodder.
And it's not, I think that remix is not just the art or music or mixed media, that it's also mixing of tools with, you put one tool with another tool to create something even cooler or not, that you're learning the parameters of what's interesting, but then also that remix of ideas that pushes things even further.
It has to happen, and it's happened in there have been these wonderful turns of history where these things happen. Sometimes they happen at the top of the century, sometimes they don't. But they happen. They happen. It seems like society gets to a place and it has to do something.
Tipping point.
It can go either way, though. It's gone backwards when we went to the Dark Ages.
Yes.
It's really kind of a fragile thing, and the leaders help or don't help, depending on how they lead. But I think it's important for us now that we can have communities of people who have certain passions. We can drive now. We don't have to wait to see what the potentate's going to dictate, what they'll do to us next. I believe that we have a lot of say in how we move this forward by our advocacy, our blogs, our podcasts, and our networks.
Which leads perfectly toward problems and problem solutions, passions, and to bring that back into school, it's that project, problem, and passion-based learning.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get our kids to be able to swim in this mess of remix, and not just swim, but
Surf. Surf. The waters are variable. Don't get lost in the water. Surf it. If you can negotiate all of these variables and get what you want, you're going to win. So if you let kids rehearse that while they're with us, throw those things at them on purpose. And if we can't simulate all of life, simulate much of life. Simulate the setbacks too. Unplug the network so that they don't have the internet for an hour, and let them see what they will do. Throw variables in there like that. To me, that's creative too. Solving a problem is creativity.
Yes.
Because you've got to take everything you know and come up with a solution that no one knows yet. So you're going to give birth to a new concept or a new idea. I think struggle is a really wonderful incubator for invention. Let's get to PBL, because everything we've been saying has had my mind in your PBL school there in Emporia, Turning Point Learning Center, because those things happened every day in those places. And not always because you wanted it to, but sometimes it was a struggle because you were working against a situation or something. But project-based learning, that's got a broad interpretation to a lot of people, but I want to land this thing where you believe it lives, and then talk forward about how we include those first two topics in project-based learning.
Well, and that's why I talk project, problem, and passion-based learning. I think it's all really shades of the same color, which is gray. I think that when we look at this type of learning environment, it excludes, partially, how we've done things before. I say partially because, the idea that someone can tell another human being everything that they are going to, or not just another human being, but 25 or 40 or 130 in a year, human beings, exactly what they're going to need to know in their lives. That's just, in a line of what we're talking about here is just crazy. And so that to create an environment that invites, that requires that creativity, that requires that remix, that is what is, that's what's going to allow kids to practice for life. Mm-hmm. And practice their lives right now. Like you said, this is life. This is our stage right now. Right. Not, once you turn 18, once you get out of college.
Right. And so that's the thing we were talking about this morning, is that life started when they were born, not when they graduate. Mm-hmm. The show is already going on. You're not backstage waiting. This is not rehearsal. The show is now, and these rehearsals that we let kids do, and by the way, that takes a certain amount of bravery to allow there to be enough left on the table in terms of choice to let kids make mistakes. Mm-hmm. Do they learn from mistakes? Mm-hmm. Are we allowed to make mistakes in public education? What happens if we fail in public education? Does it make the papers? Do we have the teachers in stockades in the public square to make fun of them? This is medieval, what we've been doing.
And parents who may not understand because they were grown up in another time and place. One of my most favorite things now is as I'm watching old movies, because my husband loves old movies. And not just old from the black and white Humphrey Bogarts, but even more modern to the old movies from the 1990s. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm old. And that I watch these things and think, that would never be a situation now. This whole movie would never exist because that's not reality. We have a cell phone. Right. We have GPS. We have, this movie's just done now. And that we have to think so differently. The parents who grew up in that environment sometimes have as hard a time shifting toward this philosophy, because school is what it has been.
And part of the creativity for you and I is helping them see that new vision. As you're watching those movies, what becomes clear is that those movies and those books are now reconciled to a genre, I'll call it a time genre, that they have to live within and they can't go beyond, and now they can be appreciated as a kind of art like daguerreotype or tintype, but they didn't make it further. If your mindset is still like that, you didn't make it further either. You just don't know it yet. You're irrelevant. And if you're teaching kids to be like you're manufacturing more irrelevant humans who can't function in this world. If you love kids, we must do better than that.
And one of the things I love in working with you is because when you lay out your delicious words where people can't help but love and think, oh, I've got to do that. This is where I love to come in to help the teachers understand what it looks like on a daily basis.
Right.
How do I group kids to where I'm not creating inadvertently bullies?
Right.
How do I really capture true learning in this sort of messy environment? How do I get them to know the stuff they must know, but yet still want to know the stuff they must know without carrot and sticking them to death? You know?
And that's acknowledging the human in the child.
That's hard.
It is
But
hard,
it's totally
but
doable.
again, we've set ourselves up for this.
That's
We
right.
said that one person can teach 20 kids effectively. Can one mom raise 20 children effectively? Biology says no, but we've done this impossible thing. Now, up till now, I think we've done the wrong thing. We've had one person at the front of the room teaching kids that one person was smart, and that if you can suckle from this learning teat the rest of your life, you'll be fine. But otherwise, you're going to need them. You're going to need someone else. We didn't empower kids to be self-directed learners, to be.
I talk to my kids and they say, well, why don't you just tell me these things? And the parents, why why do you teach this way? And the quickest thing that usually made parents' eyes open wide is, well, unless you want your children to live with you or me for the rest of their lives, just us telling them what to and do how to, we've got to create an environment where they have to, not just get to, but have to make those decisions that have real consequences, that are protected, but real. I mean, I'm not going to throw kids to the wolves,
Right.
but that are still scary enough to where it matters what they're learning. And that's project-based learning in and out.
Scary. Fear and excitement are next door neighbors. And when a kid succeeds in that environment, what's their self-esteem look like?
That's the only way to build true self-esteem. You can tell a kid all day long how awesome they are. If they don't believe it in their heart, it's not true. The only way we can get them to understand it and believe it in their heart, what Susan Weinbrenner talked about that several decades ago, is the quickest way to steal a kid's self-confidence is to not let them succeed at I'm paraphrasing, a situation that they perceived as difficult. If they can do that, then that's where real self-esteem, I will add, persistence in withstanding discomfort, the blisters on the fingers. You've got to have some level and measure of success before you're willing to take on that pain again.
It takes us to places like audience, authentic audience, relevance. But one thing I like to come back and tell, I had an art teacher once who saved everyone from struggle. Whenever you struggled, he came over, literally grabbed your pencil and drew for you. One day he did this and he lost himself and drew for 15 minutes in my drawing. And then when he got done, he's smiling like, we succeeded. And I said, what grade will you give you for this? And he got angry. What I was trying to say is, don't touch my paper. This is my work, my struggle that I want to have. I want to go sometime in the future, though, Ginger, into this conversation. When we level kids out and we differentiate and we separate by level and ability and we mix that up, that we create bullies. I agree with you there, and I'd like to go deeper on that. This isn't probably the episode to do that, but that is something that's really forcing. I think if we're manufacturing situations that vilify certain kids at certain levels,
We don't mean to,
no, we're trying to do well,
but we do it.
Right.
And we pay big money to have people teach us how to do these things, and we're doing it wrong.
We've opened up many cans of worms here, and the next part of this is a conversation that we'll have live with you after watching this, and you can pick us on and ask us anything about anything we've talked about. Thank you for doing
Yes,
this
please.
part. Look forward to the conversation.